I like this candle. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my process for writing books, some equations that I present to the kids around best practices around happiness. Did an analysis of the cohort here, and I feel as if I fit in this cohort in terms of age, profession, likely sort of economic range, and I want to talk a little bit about what I think the most likely meteors are that could take us off track in terms of our own happiness. And then I'll wrap up with what a lot of the research says are the one or two best practices around trying to build a life not just of happiness. Happiness is a sensation. You can get that, as Terry referenced, from Netflix or Chipotle, but how do we make the investments and invest in the relationships such that over the course of our life, the arc of the ups and downs, and everyone has them, is a little bit higher than average. So anyways, with that, how we got here. My process for writing books is pretty straightforward. I take my most popular course, I do a video, and if the video works, I turn it into a book. And the second most popular session in my course, I've taught 4,000 kids now, is called The Four, and I take the kids through the 4 platforms: Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. I think the second year in business school is just a racket to double the tuition we get. They don't really need the second year. If we had any integrity, we'd have 4 courses, one called Apple, one called Amazon, one called Facebook, and one called Google. I generally believe that. So I did a video on my class, I got 1 million views, and boom, did a book. Book did well, publisher called, we need a second book. I said, why? Because the first one did well. The pump is primed, the distribution channel. And I'm like, I don't have the vision. She's like, it doesn't matter, it can be shit, just get me a book within the next 60 days. So I came back and said, well, I have a vision for a book and I've written most of it. And she said, oh, fantastic, great, what's it called? It's called The Algebra of Happiness. And she said, no, 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 no. Write about tech, write about Amazon, call Sheryl Sandberg a liar, whatever, just get another book out about tech. But I decided that the last class was what I was going to write a book about, and that is the last class that my students see is I've observed a lot of very successful people, some are happy, some aren't, and I got fascinated with the topic, mostly because I'm trying to struggle my own kind of anger and depression, and I look at my blessings and I look at my mood, and the two don't foot to one another. And my sister summarized it for me about 2 years when on a phone call we talk, or we speak every Sunday night. She said, why are you so pissed off all the time? She said, look at your life. Like, you have less right to be pissed off than anyone I know, and you're pissed off all the time. And it really got me thinking that I needed to work on this. And so I took it. This has been a nice personal journey for me, and I've turned it into a class, turned it into a video. The video got 2 million views, and here we are today with the book. So I like to be introduced as Scott Galloway when I'm talking about this topic because I have no academic credibility here. I don't think it's fair to introduce me as an academic. I don't have any degrees. I have done no original peer-reviewed academic research. I just think about this a lot, and it's purposely called Notes on the Pursuit of Success, Love, and Meaning, not anything around the secret or the answers to. I did try to do a decent amount of research and homework. There was about 3 of us. I think I've now read every book and every study on happiness, so I'd like to think that we did our work. So just to start off, all the research comes back that there's an arc of happiness, and that is pretty much until the age of 25, Disneyland beer, football games, sexual exploration or non-sexual exploration if you were me until you were 25. You basically, these are great times, right? We're pretty happy. And then about 25 to 45, our happiness dips substantially, and it's what I call the stage in our life of shit gets real, right? You find out you're not going to have a fragrance named after you, you're not going to be a senator, and all the expectations and goals that your parents and your college has told you you're capable of may not be coming as quick as you'd like. And despite that people with children feel more satisfied and are happier at the end of their life that they had children, people without kids are actually happier than people with children. And so if you have kids, you have a lot of stress. You're likely going to encounter some sort of economic duress during this time. And also someone you love gets sick and dies. And it kind of hits you square in the face. So 25 to 45 are, generally speaking, our least happy years. And the advice I give the kids is simple, that when you face adversity or unhappiness in this period in your life, that's a natural part of the cycle, and to keep on keeping on. And then the good news is something in your 50s, maybe earlier if your soulful happens, and that is you start taking stock of your blessings. Hopefully you've achieved some of the bigger things in your life. Hopefully you're healthy. Hopefully you have these things that look, smell, and feel like you that get less and less awful every day, called kids. And you realize that life is finite. and you start appreciating things and kind of taking wonder in things you didn't appreciate before, right? Great food, nature, time with friends. You start taking stock of your blessings. And the cohort consistently across all economic and socio groups and all ethnicities are seniors. And when you really think about it, their life sucks. I mean, watch CNBC, which I now affectionately refer to as catheter television. By the way, I used to be on every Wednesday, and they just stopped inviting me, so let me just riff on CNBC. Basically, the average age of a CNBC viewer is 67. So if my kid at 10 actually turns it on, it means someone who's 134 is watching. And now, because of the shit show that is Facebook, that is weaponized on a massive scale, the greatest destruction, and is promoted to individuals who've done more damage and destruction while making more money than any two individuals in history, it's created, Sheryl Sandberg and Mark Zuckerberg, it's created cloud cover for business television where respectable business journalists are pimped so we can have defraud seniors with things like Trade Like Chuck, showing a man on the beach who has a proprietary trading system. Well done, CNBC. Good stuff.
This is the worst day of my life.
The worst day of your life so far.
Okay, so there's an arc to happiness. First equation. Some other equations. I think the amount of time or the ratio you spend sweating, the ratio of time you spend sweating to watching other people sweat, is a forward-looking indicator of your happiness. I think spectator sports are the new cancer. Show me someone who watches ESPN 2 or 3 hours a night and spends their Sundays watching broadcast television sports. I'll show you someone who has a future of failed relationships and anger in their life. Show me somebody who does SoulCycle or CrossFit 2 or 3 times a week and uses sports and spectator sports as a means of increasing intimacy with other and interactions and bonding with their friends and their family, and I'll show you someone who's good at life. It's pretty simple. I don't allow my kids to spend any more time watching sports than they do spending playing them, and I think it's a healthy ratio to inculcate for the rest of your life. Basically, television outs you as poor. If you're watching broadcast television, advertising has become the tax that the technologically illiterate and the poor have to pay. So if you're watching a lot of sports, if you're watching a lot of ads, it means your life isn't going very well. This is do as I say, not as I do, and it is meant to make you like me more. It's emotionally manipulative. It's a picture of me and my son at World Cup. What do CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs, have most in common? Is they went to Ivy League schools? Is it even that they have college educations? No, it's that they work out. Exercise is a key component of success moving forward. People talk a lot about balance. It's a big theme at Stern. We're talking about the importance for balance. I think balance is a myth. When I survey my kids, when I say my kids, I say my 27-year-olds who are going to work in investment banking, making $120,000 to $200,000 their first year out of college. Most of them, I survey them and I say, where do you want to be economically in 10 years? Or where do you expect to be? And they all give me numbers that put them between usually the 95th and the 99.5th percentile. And I'm like, well, fine. If you expect to be in that weight class economically by the time you're 30, then just resign yourself to the notion of balance as a myth. And that is, I don't know anybody who reached that economic weight class without inheriting the money that didn't pretty much give up their entire 20s and 30s for pretty much nothing else but work. And I decided, and people don't like to talk about this, people like to assume that anyone that has money just fell into it or was so passionate about something, they found something they loved. I decided at a very early age that economics were very important to me. And I joke, it cost me my hair in my first marriage, but the bottom line is I don't really remember much anything other than working in my 20s and 30s. And you know what? People ask me, well, was it worth it? And the answer is yes, because I have a lot of balance now. You know, economics provide balance later in life, but don't kid yourself. You need to have an honest conversation around where you expect to be and the trade-offs at a young age. The worst advice kids get, absolute worst advice, there's 2 types of speakers at Stern. Every day, we have 3 or 4 of them a week. They're either incredibly impressive people or they're billionaires. Those are the 2 requisites to come speak at Stern. And the billionaires always end their speech with the following bullshit. Follow your passion. Follow your passion. Anybody who tells you to follow your passion is already rich. And the guy on stage telling you to follow your passion usually made his billions in iron ore smelting or healthcare as a maintenance, software as a service. Your key as a young person is to find something you're good at and then make the requisite investment in perseverance, grit, and frustration called work, and overcome obstacles such that you can become great at it. And the accoutrements of being great at something, economic security, respect of your colleagues, pride, getting a broader selection set of mates such that you can marry someone more interesting than you will find all of these things make you more passionate about whatever it is. There are people passionate about tax law because it affords them a wonderful life. So your key isn't to follow your passion. Yeah, we all know somebody who's great at what they do, is wealthy, attracts a ton of money just accidentally, is handsome, works out, donates time at the ASPCA, and has a food blog. Assume you are not that person. Jay-Z pursued his passion and he's a billionaire. You are not Jay-Z. This is our life according to Instagram. I don't even know what this lady is doing. I think Instagram should be forced to be more about real life, right? And here's Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs telling everyone to follow their passion. What's the most important decision you'll make in your life? Most of my kids think it's where they live or where they're going to go to work or if they go into an industry that's on the upswing or the downswing. No, it's not. The most important decision you'll make in your life, hands down, is not where you work, it's not your cohort, it's who you partner with the rest of your life, specifically your spouse. I have a lot of friends who are very successful in every exterior dimension, and they don't have a real partner in their spouse. And it makes the downtimes tougher, and it makes the upside less enjoyable. Whereas I have a lot of friends who aren't, from on a lot of traditional metrics, very successful, but they have a real partner in their spouse, and it just makes everything burn a little brighter. The thing that takes 20 and 30-somethings off track the most economically is full stop. Most people think it's healthcare. It's not. Very few people in their 20s and 30s get sick. It's divorce. There is nothing more economically devastating that can take a 20-something or a 30-something off track than divorce. So it's really key to upfront figure out some key questions around who to partner with. I have personal experience with this. My parents were living the American dream. My dad and my mother, 13, pulled out of school when they were 8th grade, immigrated to the US. My dad was a salesman for ITT, my mother a secretary, but they strung together enough money to buy a house overlooking the beach if you stood on your toes in the living room in Laguna Niguel. We were literally living the American dream. I was thriving. I was an all-star in baseball, doing well at school. And my dad started his third marriage a little early during his second marriage, and within 6 months, by the way, he's on his fourth, but we think this one's gonna stick. In sum, my dad fucked up, and within 6 months, all of us were living in shitty apartments filled with like rage. I mean, it just totally took everybody off track, and I think for about 10 years, it took us literally all of us about a decade to recover. So I think it's important up front to talk, oh, by the way, this is Jeff Bezos' view on divorce. I don't think divorce is a laughing matter, but when you put it on your Facebook page, it's public consumption. So Jeff feels that divorce, we also see wonderful futures ahead as parents, friends, partners in ventures and projects, and as individuals pursuing ventures and adventures together. And I just want to let you know, as someone who's been divorced, that perfectly describes divorce. Okay, so what makes for a good partnership over the course of your life if this is the most important decision? The first is sex and affection. I think this establishes your relationship as singular. It says, I choose you, and it's very important. The second is values. Things like how close are we going to be to our parents geographically? What's the role of religion in our kids' life? Where are we going to live? And then the final thing that young people don't ever talk about, and it's the number one source of divorce. People think the number one source of divorce is infidelity. It's not. It's money, specifically agita around money. What are your expectations around economics? Who's supposed to make the money? What are each of your approaches to spending the money? What economic weight class do you expect to be in, and who's responsible for ensuring that you get to that weight class and stay in it? Zip code plus credentials. Give me a kid's college degree and where he's living, and I'll tell you how much money he's going to make within a 10% confidence interval. Show me a woman who's graduated from Dartmouth, lives in San Francisco or New York. That person's going to be making at least $150,000 by the time they're 30. Show me someone who dropped out of junior college and lives in Little Rock. They'll be lucky if they're making $50,000. We used to be, when I say we, I mean academics, we used to be the upward mobility of the middle class in America. We've now become the caste system as we become drunk on exclusivity, failing to realize we're public servants, not luxury brands, and have failed to increase the number of seats across universities across America such that we can say that 90% of our applicants didn't get in, which in my view is tantamount to a homeless shelter bragging that we turned away 90% of the people last year. We have literally lost the script in higher education, and as a result, we have a caste system. Full stop. People talk about India and Europe having a caste system. America has a caste system. It's called the degree you get. It sets your economic trajectory for your 20s, and your 20s largely set the economic trajectory for the rest of your life. In addition, 20 or 30 cities globally are going to be responsible for 2/3 of the GDP growth. So it's all about your credential and where you are. When you're in New York, you're on the tennis court with Roger Federer and everything you do. And just as when you play with tennis players that are better than you, your game increases. So the bottom line is you want to get to a city such that everything you do, you get a little bit better at, and you're subject to the best snow and the best waves in the world, which make you a better skier and a better surfer, called economic growth. You'd rather be mediocre in New York than great in St. Louis. Gratitude is hugely important, so I always like to shout out that the reason I'm on this stage is the generosity and vision of California taxpayers and the regents of UC. I had a 2.27 GPA from UCLA. I lied about my grades and got a job at Morgan Stanley, and then Berkeley, another state school, after being rejected from esteemed programs, MBA programs at Indiana and the University of Texas. Berkeley let me in, and they called me and said, you're not qualified, but you're a native son of California. So I was like, it's easy to credit your grit and your character with your success and credit the markets with your failures. I have no illusions. I'm here because of public education. There is a correlation between money and happiness. Middle class people are happier than lower class or lower income people, and the affluent are happier than the middle class. That's the bad news. The good news is it tops out, and that is once you can afford housing, education, nice vacations, absorb an economic shock, there's no longer a correlation between increased money and happiness. Now, billionaires are no less happy than millionaires. That's also a myth, but they're no happier. So in most cities, according to the study, it was 75 to 120K. I think in New York, it's probably about 750. But supposedly at somewhere about, as you're approaching $1 million a year, you need to think about what else makes you happy. And I think it's very easy to start howling in the money storm, and I'll come back to that. Compound interest, you're going to forget more about this than I'm going to know, but the notion that you can put $100 aside when you're 22, 23 every month, and it turns into millions of dollars. This is also true of relationships. Most people identify the one singular relationship in their life as their mother. And it's not only instinctive, it's because your mom typically made these millions of little investments from a very early age. Little things every day. My mom used to wait up with me in the middle of the night when I had terrible bloody noses. All these little things. And then you wake up and that's kind of the singular investment that is just, or return or relationship that is sort of irreplaceable. And I think the same is true in the advice I give to young people that I didn't make, the investments I didn't make until I was much older in life, is little investments, text messages, congratulations, going to funerals, going to reunions, telling people you admire them. Little things are small, and then the return is immense if you make them consistently enough over a long period of time. And my biggest regret is not making more of those little investments or not saving more in a relationship bank when I was a young man. Finding your gorilla. I've been in media all day. The only thing I've gotten pushback on, or the most controversial part of this book, as you can tell, this is kind of a feel-good book that everyone just sort of nods their head most of the time. But where I'm getting some pushback is on the following. I think it's very rewarding, and I look at this through the lens of a male heterosexual man who's 54. I think it's very rewarding to embrace your gender. And I think it's important that we're having a discussion around the spectrum of gender, and that all people on all points in that spectrum should be treated with the same level of respect. But I think we have mistakenly conflated masculinity with toxicity in our society. And that masculinity is a wonderful thing, and that young men should embrace their masculinity. They just need to do a better job of defining what it is to be masculine. When I was 22 and at Morgan Stanley, and I literally just came from the building I started at, I thought being a man meant being ripped. I didn't work out for fitness, for health. I worked out just to be huge. I thought it meant sleeping with as many strange women as possible, and also just generally being awesome. I had no idea what investment banking was, but I heard it was awesome, so I decided I was going to be an investment banker. As I've gotten older, I still swing on vines, but the vines have changed of masculinity. Being a good neighbor, voting, taking an interest in the child, or the well-being of a child that isn't mine. Most pack animals pick their leader, the matriarch or the patriarch, based on who demonstrates a concern for other children, reflecting strength. So my advice to the men in the classroom is embrace your gender. Masculinity is a wonderful thing. Just figure out what it means to be a man versus a boy. Identify what real masculinity is and start behaving that way sooner rather than later. What is rich? Rich is passive income greater than your burn. A tale of two families. My father and his wife get $58,000 a year between their Social Security and his retirement pension from the Royal Navy. They spend $50,000 and they are happy. They are just in bliss that they are saving money at the ages of 88. I have a very close friend who works for a bulge bracket investment bank, overseeing 1,100 people. He makes between $3 and $7 million a year, depending upon the market. And between his ex-wife, his alimony, his child support, his house in the Hamptons, his master of the universe lifestyle, he spends all of it. And I can tell you firsthand, several nights a month, he stares at the ceiling in sheer fear about what happens when the music stops. He is poor. So what's the lesson here? Young people focus on their income. Adults manage their burn. And that is have an honest conversation about putting yourself on a path such that at some point in your 50s, your 60s, or your 70s, that passive income you'll get from rental income on properties, dividends, pension, whatever it might be, will be greater than your burn. Things versus experiences, a lot of great research here, very simple. People overestimate the joy they'll get from things, and they underestimate the joy they'll get from experiences. The lesson here is simple. Buy a Hyundai and take your husband to Africa. A good death and ROI. There's a lot of discussion about the joys of raising children or lack thereof. I have found that giving someone a good death is very rewarding. I'm very proud of my kids, I'm proud of my career, and I'm proud of the fact that I gave my mother a good death. When she was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I said, "What's your bucket list?" She said, "I only have one thing on my bucket list." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "To die at home." That was not easy. Anyways, I'm not going to go into that, or I'll stop crying and Terry will have to come up here and hold me. Most happiness, or the happiest people, typically are in a family. But family is an amorphous word. And that is an aunt partners with her niece to help raise children together. Two brothers move in together and decide they're going to share costs, and they're incredibly loyal to one another. So family has an amorphous term here. It can mean a lot of different things, but the happiest people can identify close familial bonds immediately. I think success is a function of resilience over failure. I've started 9 businesses. I'm generously 3, 4, and 2. And the reason I'm economically secure was I had the resilience to get beamed in the face. I mean, in the fucking face a few times. And get up and dust off my pants and get back to the plate and swing harder. So when something bad happens to you, I think you need to recognize that mourning is important, but the key to success is your ability to mourn and move on. And the notion that you don't get up and try again. I've had businesses go bankrupt, divorce, a lot of shit go down before the age of 40. But the wonderful thing about this economy and this experiment called America is that while we don't embrace failure, that's bullshit, we tolerate it. And if you aren't trying harder and harder and trying a lot, even after failures, you're not taking advantage of what is the greatest system in the world, and that's the United States. So some animations here. Nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems. In 1999, I was looking at jets and was supposedly on paper worth $300 million, according to Frank Quattrone, who was taking my company public. By March of 2000, I was no longer worth $300 million. By 2008, I had a negative net worth. And about the same time, my oldest son had the poor judgment to come rotating out of my girlfriend. I was broke, or at least technically I was broke. I had my first kid, I was living in New York, and it was very emasculating and very humiliating. And I had the perspective to realize I wasn't the genius the market was telling me I was in 99, nor was I the idiot that the market was telling me in 2008. Life isn't about what happens to you, life is about how you respond to what happens to you. Some of the things that could take the people off track in this room. 1, howling in the money storm. If I asked most of you what were your goals when you set out on life, you would say, I want to be happy, I want to have a loving family. I want to be successful. I want to be relevant professionally. I bet most of the people in this room have checked those boxes. But you don't typically think, wow, I'm done. I should be really grateful. What you typically focus on in a capitalist society in a place like New York, in a business of finance or ad tech, is money. And that is you have a number. And it's a dangerous metric because you can always imagine more. You can imagine 2 times or 10 times that. And the problem is that becomes your metric for happiness. I think of money as ink in a pen. And that is you need to bust a move to economic security. You need to fill the pen up in your 20s and 30s, but it's not your story. The ink can write new chapters you otherwise couldn't write without money. It can make certain chapters burn brighter, but it isn't your story. It's just the ink in your pen. This is Han Solo saying he can imagine a lot of money. I'm not going to play it. One of the things that can take us off track, and Terry, I'll just go another 5 minutes. I don't know where you are, Terry. I'm out of time. Is I think a big danger for all of us is that we assume our loved ones and our friends and our coworkers are telepathic, and that there's a delta between how we feel about people and what they think we feel about them. And that is, we assume that if we love somebody, we're a loving person. No, you have to express these things. And I think men have a difficult time expressing admiration and respect and affection, especially for other men, because for some reason we see it as a currency, and that if we actually articulate it, we're losing it ourselves. The happiest people are the ones that act on their emotions, their positive emotions, and actually express these things, as opposed to just assuming the people around us are telepathic. Forgiveness is key to happiness. In any relationship, if you want it to be long-term, you have to bring forgiveness to the table. At some point, you or your partner will screw up. But the one piece of advice that seniors would give to their younger selves across almost every survey on happiness is not that they wish they'd made more money, not that they wish they'd had different partners. They wish they'd been less hard on themselves. And that is, they wish they'd been more forgiving of their own shortcomings. So forgiveness is not only a key component to successful relationships, it's key that you're forgiving of yourself. This is the worst metric in the world. Most of you know what the Dow Jones is today, but you don't know your PSA or your cholesterol level. It's an indicator of the economic wealth of the top 10% in America. Spoiler alert, they're killing it. This is a more important metric. For the first time in our country's history, our life expectancy is down 3 years in a row. We're literally dying earlier every year for the last 3 years, mostly because more people will die from opioid overdoses this year than died in the entire Vietnam conflict. Other meteors that could take the people in this room off track are what I believe is an emerging mental health crisis that is a function of 2 things. One, this concierge bulldozer parenting that we practice on our kids, where we use so many sanitary wipes on their lives, they don't develop the immunities they need to face adversity when they leave the home. And 2, these social media platforms where we've taken boys bully physically and verbally, girls bully relationally, and we've put nuclear weapons in the hands of young girls around this nation. And as a result, teenage suicide is up 80% among girls. It's up 30% among boys. And anyone in this audience with kids knows something comes off the tracks with one of your kids, literally nothing else matters. So I think that's a real emerging crisis and a risk to all of us in this room. So where does this come down to? What is the leading cause of unhappiness according to the Grant study, the largest study of its kind ever compiled on happiness? Any guesses? What is the one thing most common in the cohort that was the least happy in the largest study on happiness? Anybody? Loneliness. A lot of the research is showing that a lack of connection and loneliness is a huge source of depression. That's not what this study said. Laughter, that's a good one. I like that. It's not this one. I was totally blown away. And by the way, this is do as I say, not as I do. Alcohol. By the way, I love alcohol. I'm a better version of me drunk. I believe I believe what Churchill said. I've gotten more out of alcohol than it's gotten out of me. But I really thought about it. When I first got to Morgan Stanley, I went out every night, and I went somewhere downtown very cool and got shitty drunk with what felt like other successful people. And I was just a little less good at everything. And what I tell my kids or my students is, imagine less trans fats, less marijuana, less alcohol. Would you be a little bit better at a bunch of things? Because it's not addiction, and living under a bridge isn't a test for whether substances are a problem. It's simple. Do substances make you a little shittier at a bunch of things? And they were for me as an investment banker. And so I decided when I moved back to California, I wouldn't get rid of alcohol, but I would reduce my alcohol intake, and I've slowly bettered back. Okay, so what is the one thing that's consistent across the cohort that was happiest. Harvard Grant study, 400 men over 80 years, 4 principal scientists because they all died. A largest study of its kind. Basically, they found, and it's pretty obvious, that it's the depth and number of meaningful relationships. At work, do you feel respected and admired? And just as importantly, do people know you respect and admire them? Among your friends, do you get a sense of joy and camaraderie? And as importantly, do they feel a sense of joy and camaraderie from you? And at home, do you feel an intense level of love and support? And just as importantly, do you know, they know that you love and support them? And it's got the greatest opening line of any academic study in history. And this 400-page report is summarized with the opening line of happiness is love, full stop.